911, where's your emergency?
Someone is a robber at a pawn shop.
Someone's robbing the pawn shop?
And my parents got shot.
Where is the robber?
He's right here right now.
Where are your parents?
They're dead on the ground. Come here quickly because I'm afraid.
The police immediately rushed to the scene of the crime, hoping to save 9-year-old Andrew and his 14-month-old sister, Naomi. An unknown man had committed a ruthless attack on the priest and his family. Leaving no traces behind, the criminal made it one of the detectives' most challenging cases in the detectives' careers. Fortunately, they managed to find witnesses who had seen everything. Their testimonies helped uncover the truth about what had really happened to the Hockensmith family. In 2013, in Danville, Kentucky, 35-year-old priest Michael Hockensmith, who had previously worked as a manager at a local pawn shop, had to take full control of the pawn shop due to the former owner's health condition. As a former priest, Michael had always been honest with people. He easily found common ground with others and was always willing to help. When he decided to get married, no one doubted his choice. Angie was his first love, and everyone saw her as a very sweet and kind girl. Michael literally worshipped the ground she walked on. When the couple had children, their relationship became even stronger. Together, they were a very happy family. As the Hawkin-Smith family expanded, so did their business. The pawn shop, ABC Gold, Games and More, became a successful family venture, attracting regular customers like broker Dan Smith, with whom they often conducted business on Fridays. Life seemed perfect for the Hockensmiths until one day in 2013 when an unknown man decided to disrupt their peaceful existence.
"911, where's your emergency?"
Someone is a robber at a pawn shop.
Someone's robbing the pawn shop?
And my parents got shot.
Where is the robber?
He's right here right now.
The robber, does he have a gun?
Yes. He shot my parents.
Okay, can he see you?
I'm in the back right now.
You're in the back? So the robber's up front of the store?
Yes, but I don't know if he's here or not. But come quickly.
Where are your parents?
They're dead on the ground. Come here quickly because I'm afraid. Please hurry.
Okay, they're coming, okay?
6 minutes after the phone call, police officers arrived at the scene of the crime. When they entered the building, their attention was immediately drawn to a large bloody trail, which led them to Michael Hockensmith. Moments later, they found his 38-year-old wife, Angie, and on the other side of the counter, they discovered the third victim of the crime, 60-year-old broker Dan Smith. All three victims had gunshot wounds to the head and torso. A few minutes later, officers found Andrew Hockensmith and his little sister Naomi hiding in a closet. The officers' accounts indicated the unimaginable horror these young children had endured. Suddenly, the 9-year-old boy and his 14-month-old sister were left orphaned, having lost both parents. Upon examining the crime scene, police found 14 spent .22 caliber shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase that belonged to Dan Smith. The victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the register were left untouched, suggesting that robbery was not the motive for the crime. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop, posing a significant obstacle to the investigation. The police had no choice but to rely on finding potential witnesses to the crime. An employee of the nearby Rainbow Cleaners was able to describe a car that had parked near the building that morning. It was a silver minivan, driven by a large man with a thick beard. While one group of investigators searched the surrounding area, Another informed the closest relatives about the tragedy that had befallen their loved ones. Michael's parents found it difficult to accept the circumstances that someone in their right mind could wish harm to their children. Nevertheless, they tried to find any positive aspect in the situation, and the fact that their grandchildren had survived could not but rejoice them.
If it hadn't been for Andrew and Naomi, I don't think I would have survived.
Soon, the tragic news reached the daughter of the third victim, Dan Smith. He was involved in buying precious metals and skillfully adapted to the specifics of his work, easily finding common ground with different people. His business involved handling large sums of cash, sometimes exceeding hundreds of thousands of dollars. This led the police to consider the theory that Dan Smith himself could have been the primary target of the criminal. Tracking the man's movements revealed that before he arrived at the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop, he had visited Lawson's jewelry store in Harrodsburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. In the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera positioned on the far wall to capture every visitor entering and exiting the store. They hoped that the recording would help them determine if anyone had been following Dan Smith. Smith entered the store at 8:16 in the morning, and there were no other customers in the building at the time. He was carrying the same briefcase that was later found at the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop. After greeting the woman behind the counter with a smile, headed to the back of the store. Sometime later, Dan Smith reappeared on the footage, coming out from the back of the store, saying something to an elderly woman who had just entered, and then immediately leaving. It was a typical day in the life of the jewelry store. The external camera recording showed nothing suspicious. The police were left to helplessly monitor the man who had no idea he would soon be at the center of a tragic event. Meanwhile, 9-year-old Andrew Hockensmith was taken to the police station to give his testimony. Andrew described how he had been at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith arrived carrying a bag full of money. While his father and Dan were talking, the stranger entered and immediately demanded the bag. According to the boy, Dan Smith immediately handed over his briefcase, after which the stranger shot him. "My father asked him to stop, but he also shot him with a pistol similar to the one I play with," Andrew said. Meanwhile, the mother instructed Andrew to take Naomi to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew took his little sister and hid. It was then that the criminal aimed the gun at Angie. "I don't know who he is and why he did it, but it seems to me that the reason was money," the 9-year-old boy concluded. He described the stranger as a very tall man, with a blonde beard that looked fake, matching the description provided by a witness from Rainbow Cleaners. To follow all possible leads, the police's next step was to thoroughly examine the business run by the Hawkin-Smith family. It turned out that the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop had another owner, Steve Devine. While he usually attended Friday deals with Dan Smith, he was absent on the tragic morning of September 20th. This information raised concerns, making determining his whereabouts a top priority. Steve Devine explained that he had developed an allergy that morning and was forced to cancel all his appointments, a story confirmed by his wife. The alibi and the fact that Steve Devine did not own a silver minivan helped to rule him out as a suspect. He also explained why there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop. According to him, the security system had been removed by the previous owner, Kenneth Keith, and the new owners had not yet installed a replacement. 48-year-old Keith, like his deceased friend Michael Hockensmith, was a priest. Pastor Keith sold the pawn shop when he was diagnosed with brain cancer, but he remained the owner of another similar establishment, Gold Rush Buyers, in Pulaski County, neighboring Danville's Boyle County. Michael's family revealed that he prayed for his friend every evening, hoping for his recovery. Their friendship, which began when Michael worked at a youth church camp, had lasted for 15 years. The Hawkin-Smith family always held Pastor Keith in high regard, and for their son Andrew, he was like a beloved uncle. With no significant leads, investigators decided to try their luck in finding possible street surveillance systems near the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. They found a camera on the office building of the real estate office, Danville Rentals. The surveillance footage captured a silver minivan at 8:45 in the morning, but the image was too blurry to identify the license plate or the make of the vehicle. Once again, the police had to rely on the witness's testimony from Rainbow Cleaners, which described the car as an old model with a distinctive square body shape. The car in the video clearly showed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the car all indicated that the police had found the criminal's vehicle. They continued to search for surveillance systems farther and farther from the pawn shop. At 8:17 in the morning, the camera at the local Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle. And finally, investigators were able to determine that it was a silver Dodge minivan. Michael and Angela's family organized a candlelight vigil in their memory. Hundreds of compassionate people attended that evening, demonstrating the depth of love for their lost ones. Similarly, like the Hockensmith family, Dan Smith's close relatives were outraged that the whims of another had led to the loss of their loved one. Despite their grief, they chose not to let anger overshadow their other emotions and joined in the funeral proceedings. Meanwhile, the Danville Police Department appealed to the public for any information about the criminal or his vehicle. Immediately after this, on September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Harold, a pastor in Warren, Michigan. He claimed to be a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they touched on the topic of the murder in Danville, and at that moment, Mr. Keith seemed to change. Pastor Kenneth Allen informed his friend that on that particular day, he was driving to Danville for medicine for his wife. He also expressed a sense of guilt for what happened, as he had given Michael Hockensmith the opportunity to become the owner of his former business. Keith put forward the theory that Dan Smith himself could have been the main target of the attacker. Keith explained that Dan would come to him every Sunday to pawn all his gold, always carrying large sums of cash with him. Keith speculated that someone might have tracked Dan's route and ultimately targeted him, but there was more to the story. As it turned out, the pastor's relationship with the Hockensmith family was not as everyone had believed.
Between you and me, brother, they were crooked people. They went into it with the whole point from day one to take over that business from me.
These words raised suspicions, leading to Pastor Keith being added to the list of suspects. To verify his alibi, investigators decided to review the surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where, according to the pastor, he bought medicine for his wife. At 9:24 in the morning, a man entered the pharmacy, indeed Pastor Kenneth Allen Keith, but he looked nothing like the man who had committed the triple attack just minutes earlier. He was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which were distinctive features of the assailant. However, this did not rule out his involvement in the attack. There was a 7-minute gap between Andrew Hockensmith's call to the police and the pastor's arrival at the pharmacy. The police decided to check if it was possible to travel from the crime scene to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy in such a short time. They found that the trip took about 5 minutes in total, so it was plausible to commit the murders, quickly get into a car, and reach the pharmacy to establish a solid alibi. The key clue was that Pastor Keith had an unregistered 2008 Dodge minivan, which was silver. However, all the evidence found was circumstantial, and it was not enough for an arrest. So, investigators turned to Tracy Harold to participate in a series of fake phone calls aimed at the suspect. Luckily, Tracy agreed. During these calls, Pastor Keith finally revealed his true feelings towards the Hockensmith family.
When somebody's being murdered in such a heinous way as what this was, you want to make them, out to be saints. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But between you and me, brother, they were crooked people.
Is that right?
They went into it with the whole point from day one to take over that business from me. I don't mean to speak ill.
No, hey.
Facts are facts.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I can't tell nobody none of this because what does it make me look?
Yeah.
It makes me look like a perpetrator, see?
And then, what everyone had been waiting for happened. Keith began discussing details of the case that had not been made public.
I was in Danville, but I was at the pharmacy. I'm standing in the pharmacy while all this happened.
Following that, Pastor Kenneth Keith explained that he left Danville and returned to Somerset. He then took his car to the car wash to prepare it for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 in the morning, Keith was seen on camera walking down the hallway to the cashier's counter with a noticeable smile. It seemed clear that he was not involved in the dreadful crime that occurred earlier that morning. The external camera footage covering the parking lot showed Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25, matching all the images previously obtained from various surveillance systems in Danville. At that point, they had enough evidence to arrest the suspect. He was offered a polygraph test to prove or alleviate his involvement in the pawnshop crime, but his response was rather unusual. Keith stated that he would not be able to pass the polygraph successfully because during his military service he was tasked with eliminating 3 individuals. The investigators obtained a warrant to search Kenneth Allen Keith's pawn shop, where they discovered a fake beard and a significant amount of cash. The police could not find any legitimate explanation for how he acquired most of the money. They also found bundles of bills wrapped in a ribbon with the name of the bank that issued them, revealing Dan Smith as their client. Further investigation revealed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a dead broker. Additionally, several .22 caliber casings were found in Keith's pawn shop. According to ballistics analysis, they were fired from the same weapon used to shoot the parents of young Andrew and Naomi. Based on all the evidence found, Kenneth Allen Keith was charged with 3 counts of deliberate homicide and first-degree robbery. It turned out that Pastor Keith believed that Michael Hockensmith and Steve Devine had conspired to get rid of him from the business. Knowing that Dan Smith carried large sums of money, Keith decided to exact his revenge on the day of their planned meeting at the pawnshop. Keith aimed to mislead law enforcement into thinking the crime was motivated by robbery. In reality, Michael Hockensmith and his partner Steve Devine had no involvement in the imagined conspiracy against Keith. During the investigation, no evidence of discreditable activities by Michael Hockensmith and Steve Devine was found. On September 20th, the criminal arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the pawn shop for a while until he noticed Dan Smith's car parked nearby. The first victim was the broker himself, followed by Michael and then Angela Hockensmith. The pastor then took all the cash from Dan Smith's case and calmly left the crime scene, stopping at the Good Neighbor Pharmacy to be captured on its surveillance cameras and secure an alibi. His decision to go to the car wash was another attempt to remove traces and destroy any evidence that might have been left on his vehicle. In 2017, just before the trial, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before the trial, investigators obtained medical documents from the Veterans Hospital and discovered that the pastor had never had a brain tumor. How could someone who seemed so spiritually inclined commit such a heinous crime? Furthermore, how was he going to live with the knowledge of what he had done?